Hi everyone, we are back with Percy Jackson and the Battle of Labyrinth, and we are about to take up a journey to 18th chapter. The last chapter was a bit emotional, and I laughed a lot at the end of it, so probably not the message I was trying to send, but it is what it is. And I think we should get started. Chapter 18. Grover causes a stampede. Distance was shorter in the labyrinth. Still, by the time Rachel took us back to Times Square, I felt like we'd pretty much run all the way from New Mexico. We climbed out of the Marriott basement and stood on the sidewalk in the bright summer daylight, squinting at the traffic and crowds. I couldn't decide which city was real, New York or the crystal cave where I'd watched a god die. I led the way into an alley where I could get a nice echo. Then I wished as loud as I could, 5 times. A minute later, Rachel gasped. They are beautiful. A flock of pegasi descended from the sky, swooping between skyscrapers. Blackjack was in lead, followed by 4 of his white friends. Yes, boss, you lived, he spoke in my mind. Yeah, I told him. I'm lucky that way. Listen, we need to ride to camp. Quick. That's my specialty. Oh man, you got the Cyclops with you? Yo, Guido, how's your back holding up? The Pegasus Guido groaned and complained, but eventually agreed to carry Tyson. Everybody started saddling up except Rachel. Well, I guess this is it, she told me. I nodded uncomfortably. We both knew she couldn't go to camp. I glanced at Annabeth, who was pretending to be very busy with a Pegasus. Thanks, Rachel. We couldn't have done it without you. I wouldn't have missed it. I mean, except for almost dying and Han. A voice faltered. He said something about your father, I remembered. What did he mean? My dad. Rachel twisted the strap on her backpack. My dad's job. He's kind of a famous businessman. You mean you're rich? Well, yeah. So that's how you got the chauffeur to help us. You just said your dad's name and. Yes, Rachel cut me off. Percy, my dad's a land developer. He flies all over the world looking for tracts of underdeveloped land. She took a shaky breath. The wild. He he buys it up. I hate it, but he plows it down and builds ugly subdivisions and shopping centers. And now that I've seen Pan's death, hey, you can't blame yourself for that. You don't know the worst of it. I don't like to talk about my family. I didn't want you to know. I'm sorry. I shouldn't have said anything. No, it's cool, I said. Look, Rachel, you were awesome. You led us through the maze. You were brave. That's the only thing I'm going to judge you on. I don't care what your dad does. Rachel looked at me gratefully. Well, if you ever feel like hanging out with a mortal again, you could call me or something. Yeah, sure. She knitted her eyebrows. I guess I sounded unenthusiastic or something, but that's not how I meant it. I just wasn't sure what to say with all my friends standing around. And I guess my feelings had got pretty mixed up the last couple of days. I'd like that, I said. My number's not in the book, she said. I've got it. Still on your hand? No way. No, I kind of memorized it. Her smile came back slowly, but a lot happier. See you later, Percy Jackson. Go save the world for me, okay? She walked up she walked off down the 7th Avenue and disappeared into the crowds. When I got back to the horses, Nico was having trouble. His Pegasus kept shying away from him, reluctant to let him mount. He smells like dead people, the Pegasus complained. Hey now, come on, pork pie. Lots of demigods smell weird. It ain't their fault, Blackjack said. Oh, I didn't mean you, boss. Go without me, Nico said. I don't want to go back to that camp anyway. Nico, we need your help, I said. He folded his arms and scowled. Then Annabeth put a hand on his shoulder. Nico, please, she said. Slowly his expression softened. All right, he said reluctantly. For you. But I'm not staying. I raised an eyebrow at Annabeth. Like, how come? How come all of a sudden Nico listens to you? She stuck her tongue out at me. At last we got everybody on Pegasus. We shot onto the air and soon we were over the East River with Long Island spread out before us. We landed in the middle of cabin area and were immediately met by Chiron, the pot-bellied satyr Silanius, and a couple of Apollo cabin archers. Chiron raised an eyebrow when he saw Nico, but if I expected him to be surprised by latest news about Quintus being Daedalus or Kronos rising, I was mistaken. I feared as much. We must hurry, Chiron said. Hopefully you have slowed down the Titan Lord, but his vanguard will still be coming through. They will be anxious for blood. Most of our defenders are already in place. Come, wait a moment. What of the search for Pan? You are almost 3 weeks overdue, Grover Underwood. Your surgeon's license is revoked. Grover took a deep breath. He stood up straight and looked Silenus in the eyes. Searcher's license don't matter anymore. The great god Pan is dead. He has passed on and left us his spirit. What? Silenus's face turned bright red. Scrillage and lies! Grover Underwood, I will have you exiled for speaking thus. It's true. We were there when he died, all of us. Impossible. You are all liars. Nature destroyers. Chiron studied Grover's face. We will speak of this later. We will speak of it now. We must deal with this, Silenius. Chiron cut in. My camp is under attack. The matter of Pan has waited 2,000 years. I fear it will have to wait a bit longer, assuming we are all still here this evening. And on that happy note, he readied his bow and galloped towards the woods, leaving us to follow as best as we could. It was the biggest military operation I had ever seen at camp. Everyone was at the clearing, dressed in full battle armor. But this time it wasn't for capture the flag. The Hephaestus cabin had set up traps around the entrance of the labyrinth, razor wire, pits filled with pots of Greek fire, rows of sharpened sticks to deflect a charge. Beckendorf was manning 2 catapults the size of pickup trucks, already primed and aimed at Zeus's fist. The Ares cabin was on the front line, drilling the flanks formation with Clarice calling orders. Apollo's and Hermes cabins were scattered in the woods with bows ready. Many had taken up positions in the trees. Even the dryads were armed with bows, and satyrs trotted around with wooden cudgels and shields made of rough tree bark. Annabeth went to join her brethren from Athena cabin, but set up command tent and were directing operations. A grey banner with an owl fluttered outside the tent. A security chief, Argus, stood guard at the door. Aphrodite's children were running around, straightening everybody's armor and offering to comb tangles out of their horsehair plumes. Even Dionysus' kids had found something to do. The god himself was still nowhere to be seen, but his 2 blonde twin sons were running around, providing all the sweaty warriors with water bottles and juice boxes. It looked like a pretty good setup, but Chiron muttered next to me, it isn't enough. I thought about what I'd seen at the Labyrinth, all the monsters in Antaeus' stadium, and the power of Kronos I'd felt on Mount Tam. My heart sank. Chiron was right, but it was all we could muster. For once I wished Dionysus were here, but even if he had been, I didn't know if he could have done anything. When it came to the war, gods were forbidden to interfere directly. Apparently, the Titans didn't believe in restrictions like that. Over at the edge of the clearing, Grover was talking to Juniper. She held his hands while he told her our story. Green tears formed in her eyes as he delivered the news about Pan. Tyson helped the Hephaestus kids prepare the defenses. He picked up boulders and piled them next to the catapults for the firing. Stay with me, Percy. When the fighting begins, I want you to wait until we know what we are dealing with. You must go where we most need reinforcements, Chiron said. I saw Kronos, I said, still stunned by the fact. I looked straight into his eyes. It it was Luke, but it wasn't. Chiron ran his fingers along his bowstring. He had golden eyes, I would guess, and in his presence time seemed to turn liquid. I nodded. How could he take over a mortal body? I do not know, Percy. Gods have assumed the shapes of mortals for ages, but to actually become one, to merge the divine form with the mortal, I don't know how this could be done without Luke's form turning to ashes. Kronos said his body has been prepared. I shudder to think what that means, but perhaps it will limit Kronos' power, for a time at least. He's confined to a human form. It binds him together. Hopefully, it also restricts him. Chiron, if he leads this attack, I do not think so, my boy. I could sense if he were drawing near. No doubt he planned to, but I believe you inconvenienced him when you pulled his throne room down on top of him. He looked at me reproachfully. You and your friend Miko, son of Hades. A lump formed in my throat. I'm sorry, Chiron. I know I should have told you. It's just, I understand why you did it, Percy. Chiron raised his hand. You felt responsible. You sought to protect him, but my boy, if we were to survive this, we must trust each other. We must. His voice wavered. The ground underneath us was trembling. Everyone in the clearing stopped what they were doing. Clarice barked a single order: Lock shields! Then the Titan Lord's army exploded from the labyrinth. I'd been in fights before, but this was a full scale battle. The first thing I saw were a dozen of Lestrigonian giants erupting from ground, yelling so loudly my ears felt like bursting. They carried shields made from flattened cars and clubs that were tree trunks and rusty spikes bristling at the end. One of the giants bellowed at Ares' flanks, smashed it sideways with his club, and the entire cabin was thrown aside, a dozen warriors tossed to wind like rag dolls. Fire! Backendorf yelled. The catapult swung into action. Two boulders hurled towards the giants. One deflected off a car shield with hardly a dent, but the other caught a Lystrigonian in the chest and the giant went down. Apollo's archers fired a volley, dozens of arrows sticking in the dark armor of the giants like porcupine quills. Several found chinks in armor, and some of the giants vaporized at the touch of celestial bronze. But just when it looked like Lystrigonians were about to get overwhelmed, the next wave surged out of the maze. 30, maybe 40 Dracanae in full battle armor, wielding spears and nets. They, dis- they dispersed in all directions. Some hit the traps the Hephaestus cabin had laid. One got stuck on the spikes and became an easy target for archers. Another triggered a tripwire, and pots of Greek fire exploded into green flames, engulfing several of the snake women. But many more kept coming. Argus and Athena's warriors rushed forward to meet them. I saw Annabeth draw a sword and engage one of them. Nearby, Tyson was riding a giant. Somehow he'd managed to climb onto the giant's back and was hitting him in the head with a bronze shield. Bong, bong, bong. Chiron calmly aimed arrow after arrow, taking down a monster with every shot. But more enemies just kept climbing out of the maze. Finally, a hellhound, not Mrs. Lily, leaped out of the tunnel and barreled straight towards the satyrs. Go! Chiron yelled at me. I drew Riptide and charged. As I raced across the battlefield, I saw horrible things. An enemy half-blood was fighting with the son of Dionysus, but it wasn't much of a contest. The enemy stabbed him in the arm, then clubbed him over the head with the butt of his sword, and Dionysus' son went down. Another enemy warrior shot flaming arrows into the trees, sending our archers and dryads into a panic. A dozen Tracane suddenly broke away from the main fight and slithered down the path that led towards camp, like they knew where they were going. If they got out, they could burn down the entire place, completely unopposed. The only person anywhere near was Nico D'Angelo. He stabbed a Talcine with his black Stygian knife, absorbed the monster's essence, drinking its energy until there was nothing left but dust. Nico! I yelled. He looked where I was pointing. He saw the serpent women and immediately understood. He took a deep breath and held out his black sword. Serve me, he called. The earth trembled. A fissure opened in front of the Dracane and a dozen undead warriors crawled from the earth. Horrible corpses in military uniforms from all the different time periods. US revolutionaries, Roman centurions, Napoleonic cavalry on skeletal horses. As one, they drew their swords and engaged the Dracane. Nico crumbled to his knees, but I didn't have time to make sure he was okay. I closed on the hellhound, which was now pushing the satyrs back towards the woods. The beast snapped at one satyr who danced out of its way, but then it pounced on another one who was too slow. The satyr's tree bark shield cracked as he fell. Hey! I yelled. The hellhound turned. It snarled at me and leaped. It would have clawed me to pieces, but as I fell backwards, my fingers crossed around a clay jar, one of Beckendorf's containers of Greek fire. I tossed it into Hellhound's maw, and the creature went up in flames. I scrambled away, breathing heavily. The satyr who'd been trampled wasn't moving. I rushed over to check on him, but then I heard Grover's voice. Percy! The forest fire had started. Flames roared within 3 meters of Juniper's tree, and Juniper and Grover were going nuts trying to save it. Grover played a rain song on the pipes. Juniper desperately tried to beat out the flames with her green shawl, but it was only making things worse. I ran towards them, jumping past duels, weaving between the legs of giants. The nearest water was the creek, half a kilometer away, but I had to do something. I concentrated. There was a pull in my gut, a roar in my ears. Then a wall of water came rushing through the trees. It doused the fire, Juniper, Grover, and pretty much everything else. Grover blew a spout of water. Thanks, Percy. No problem. I ran back towards the fight, and Grover and Juniper followed. Grover made a cudgel in his hand, and Juniper held a stick, like an old-fashioned whipping switch. She looked really angry, like she was going to tan somebody's backside. Just when it seemed like the battle had balanced out again, like we might stand a chance, an unearthly shriek echoed out of the labyrinth, a sound I had heard before. Campe shot into the sky, her bat wings fully extended. She landed on top of Zeus's fist and surveyed the carnage. Her face was filled with evil glee. The mutant animal heads growled at her waist. Snakes hissed and swirled around her legs. In her right hand she held a glittering ball, a thread of Ariadne's string, but she popped it into a lion's mouth at her waist and drew her curved swords. The blades glowed green with poison. Campe screeched in triumph and some of the campers screamed. Some tried to run and got trampled by hellhounds or giants. The mortales, Chiron yelled. He quickly aimed an arrow, but Campe seemed to sense his presence. She took flight with amazing speed, and Chiron's arrow whizzed harmlessly past her head. Tyson untangled himself from the giant whom he'd into unconscious, pummeled into unconscious. He ran at our lines, shouting, "Stand! Do not run from her! Fight!" But then a hellhound leaped on him, and Tyson and the hound went rolling away. Campe landed on Athena command tent, smashing it flat. I ran after her and found Annabeth at my side, keeping pace, a sword in my hand. "This might be it," she said. "Could be." "Nice fighting with you, seaweed brain." "Ditto." Together we leaped into Monster's path. Campe hissed and sliced at us. I dodged, trying to distract her, while Annabeth went in for a strike. But the monster seemed to be able to fight with both hands independently. She blocked Annabeth's sword, and Annabeth had to jump back to avoid the cloud of poison. Just being near the thing was like standing in an acid fog. My eyes burned. My lungs couldn't get enough air. I knew we couldn't stand our ground for more than a few seconds. "Come on, we need help," I shouted. But no one came. Everyone was either down or fighting for their lives, or too scared to move forward. 3 of Chiron's arrows sprouted from Campe's chest, but she just roared louder. "Now," Annabeth said. Together we charged, dodged the monster's slashes, got inside her guard, and almost managed to stab Campe in the chest, but a huge bear head lashed out from the monster's waist, and we had to stumble backwards to avoid it. Get bitten. Slam! My eyesight went black. The next thing I knew, Annabeth and I were on the ground. The monster had its 4 legs on our chests, holding us down. Hundreds of snakes slithered right above me, hissing like laughter. Campe raised her green-tinged sword, and I knew Annabeth and I were out of options. Then behind me something howled. A wall of darkness slammed into Campe, sending the monster sideways, and Mrs. O'Leary was standing over us, snarling and snapping at Campe. "Good girl," said a familiar voice. Daedalus was fighting his way out of the labyrinth, slashing down enemies left and right as he made his way towards us. Next to him was someone else, a familiar giant, much taller than Listrigonians, with 100 rippling arms, each holding a huge chunk of rock. "Briarus!" Tyson cried in wonder. "Hey, little brother, stand firm," Briarus bellowed, and as Mrs. Leary leaped out of the way, the 100-handed one launched a volley of boulders at Campe. The rocks seemed to enlarge as they left Briarus' hands. There were so many it looked like half the earth had learned to fly. Boom! When Campe had stood a moment before was a mountain of boulders, almost as huge as Zeus's fist. The only sign that the monster had ever existed were 2 green swords sticking through the cracks. A cheer went up from the campus, but our enemies weren't done yet. One of the Dracani yelled, "Slay them! Kill them all, or Kronos will flay you alive." Apparently that threat was more terrifying than we were. The giants surged forward in last desperate attempt. One surprised Chiron with a glancing blow to the back legs, and he stumbled and fell. 6 giants cried in glee and rushed forward. "No!" I screamed, but I was too far away to help. Then it happened. Grover opened his mouth, and the most horrible sound I had ever heard came out. It was like a brass trumpet magnified 1,000 times, the sound of pure fear. As one, the forces of Kronos dropped their weapons and ran for their lives. The giants trampled the Dracane, trying to get into the labyrinth first. Telkines and hellhounds and enemy half-bloods scrambled after them. The tunnel rumbled shut and the battle was over. The clearing was quiet except for fires burning in the woods and the cries of the wounded. I helped Annabeth to her feet. We ran to Chiron. "Are you all right?" I asked. He was lying on his side, trying in vain to get up. How embarrassing. "I think I'll be fine," he muttered. "Fortunately, we do not shoot centaurs with broken legs. You need help. I'll get a medic from Apollo's cabin." "No, there are more serious injuries to attend to. Go." "I'm fine, but Grover, later we must talk about how you did that," Chiron insisted. "That was amazing," I agreed. Grover blushed. "I don't know where it came from." Juniper hugged him fiercely. "I do." But before she could say more, Tyson called, "Percy, come, it is Nico." There was smoke curling up off his clothes. His fingers were clenched, and the grass all around his body had turned yellow and died. I rolled him over as gently as I could and put my hand against his chest. His heart was beating faintly. "Get some nectar," I yelled. One of the Aries campers hobbled over and handed me a canteen. I trickled some of the magic drink into Nico's mouth. He coughed and spluttered, but his eyelids fluttered open. "Nico, what happened? Can you talk?" I asked. He nodded weakly. "Never tried to summon so many before." "I'll be fine." We helped him sit up and gave him some more nectar. He blinked at all of us like he was trying to remember who we were, and then he focused on someone behind me. "Daedalus," he crowed. "Yes, my boy. I made a very bad mistake. I came to correct it," the inventor said. Daedalus had a few scratches that were bleeding golden oil, but he looked better than most of us. Apparently, his automaton body healed itself quickly. Mrs. O'Leary loomed behind him, licking the wounds on her master's head, so Daedalus's head stood up funny. Briarus stood next to him, surrounded by a group of odd campers and satyrs. He looked kind of bashful, but he was signing autographs on armor, shields, and t-shirts. "I found a 100-handed one as I came through the maze," Daedalus explained. "It seems he had the same idea to come and help, but he was lost, and so we fell in together. We both came to make amends." "Yay! Briarus, I knew you would come." Tyson jumped up and down. "I did not know. But you reminded me who I am, Cyclops. You are the hero," the 100-handed one said. Tyson blushed, but I patted him on the back. "I knew that a long time ago." "But Daedalus, the Titan army is still down there. Even without the string, they'll be back. They'll find a way sooner or later with Kronos leading them." Daedalus sheathed his sword. "You are right. As long as the labyrinth is here, your enemies can use it, which is why the labyrinth cannot continue." Annabeth stared at him. But you said the labyrinth is tied to your life force. As long as you're alive." "Yes, my young architecture. When I die, the labyrinth will die as well. And so I have a present for you." Daedalus agreed. He slung a leather satchel off his back, unzipped it, and produced a slick silver laptop computer, one of the ones I'd seen in the workshop. On the lid, it had the blue delta symbol. "My work is here. It's all I managed to save from the fire. Notes on projects I never started, some of my favorite designs. I couldn't develop those over the last few millennia. I did not dare reveal my work to the mortal world, but perhaps you will find them interesting." He handed computer to Annabeth, who stared at it like it was solid gold. "You're giving me this? But this is priceless. This is worth I don't even know how much." "Small compensation for the way I acted," Daedalus said. "You were right, Annabeth, about children of Athena. We should be wise. And I was not. Someday you will be greater architect than I ever was. Take my ideas and improve them. It is the least I can do before I pass on." "Whoa, pass on? But you can't just kill yourself. That's wrong." "Not as wrong as hiding from my crimes for 2,000 years. He shook his head. Genius does not excuse evil, Percy. My time has come. I must face my punishment. You won't get a fair trial. The spirit of Minos sits in judgment, Annabeth said. I will take what comes, and trust in the justice of the underworld such as it is. That is all we can do, isn't it? He said. He looked straight at Nico, and Nico's face darkened. Yes, he said. Will you take my soul for ransom then? Daedalus asked. You could use it to reclaim your sister. No, I will help you release your spirit. But Bianca has passed. She must stay where she is, Nico said. Daedalus nodded. Well said, son of Hades. You are becoming wise. Then he turned towards me. One last favor, Percy Jackson. I cannot leave Mrs. O'Leary alone, and she has no desire to return to Underworld. Will you care for her? I looked at the massive black hound who whimpered pitifully, still licking Daedalus's hair. I was thinking that my mom's apartment wouldn't allow dogs, especially dogs bigger than the apartment, but I said, yeah, of course I will. Then I'm ready to see my son. And Perdix, he said. I must tell them how sorry I am. Annabeth had tears in her eyes. Daedalus turned towards Nico, who drew his sword. At first I was afraid Nico would kill the old inventor, but he simply said, your time is long since come. Be released and rest. A smile of relief spread across Daedalus's face. He froze like a statue. His skin turned transparent, revealing the bronze gears and machinery whirring inside his body. Then the statue turned to grey ash and disintegrated. Mrs. O'Leary howled. I patted her head, trying to comfort her as best as I could. The earth rumbled, an earthquake that could probably be felt in every major city across the country, as the ancient labyrinth collapsed. Somewhere I hoped the remains of Titan's strike force had been buried. I looked around the carnage in the clearing and the weary faces of my friends. Come on, we have work to do, I told them. I mean, good for Daedalus. Seriously, I'm glad he came back, and I'm glad he came to his senses. Also, Briarus, so good for you. I mean, I kind of figured that he would come back at the end when things would be clearer because he was so afraid. But once the fear goes, you realize that you have to do what is right. I'm glad Briarus went through that process. I feel the most bad I feel for is Mrs. O'Leary. She didn't deserve to be like that. I mean, imagine she's just a dog. Seeing her owner die. She doesn't know what to do. She would be so broken. It was a very action packed. I think my adrenaline just went right up here. But I have to calm down because two more chapters left and we have so much to do. Thank you so much for watching. I hope you like my video. Like, share, and subscribe to me, please. And I will see you guys next time. Bye.